Hey, welcome. This is the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is week 9 snaps report, trying to give you a little bit of differential insight into what's gone on before and maybe help you think about week 10. It's Friday when I'm recording this. Thursday night game was uh, crazy, shall I say? Okay. Uh, let's start it up here. Uh, First thing I do is tell you that instead of raw snaps, I like to use the rate of snap. So I figure out the time of possession on the offense and figure out snaps for players and teams and combine those two snaps per second. So I will abbreviate SPS. And what you see here is the average of first 9 weeks, average player snaps per second. And I sorted from high in purple here in this column to low. Okay, so these teams are faster than those teams. Okay, we'll talk about what that may imply here. If you've followed me, you know what that implies. So we're talking Detroit, the Rams, Philadelphia, Dallas, and Jacksonville. And then the low teams will be Miami, the Raiders, Denver, Carolina, Tennessee, Cleveland, Green Bay, New Orleans, and Baltimore. And so, and then their teams kind of in the middle. And you can see I colorized each metric here, and you can see the highs and the lows and whatnot. So those are kind of where we're at. And if we go a little further now, and I like to pull this out every once in a while, here is the average SPS. We just showed you that, at least these colorations and averages. But now I superimposed the team's rush attempts, pass attempts, and scoring attempts. And what I'll basically say, if you colorize each column from high to low, so green to red, and then you count teams in each of the columns. So the green are the highest rushing teams. We have Dallas, Arizona, Chicago, Carolina, Tennessee, Cleveland, New Orleans, and Baltimore. Did you notice where 5 of the highest rushing teams were? They happen to be in the slowest group here. So if you look, 8 teams, 5 of the 8 are right here in the slowest snaps per second in the league. And if you look at the average here, which is about 0.017879, 7 of the 8 are sitting here. So I have shown this in my workshop videos at Fake Pigskin. Got 100 lessons here. So preseason, I've already seen this. I think last year I saw it. It's one of these things that I don't know why people are not talking a little bit more about this. But long story short, the faster the teams are, the less likely they're rushing. The slower the teams are, more likely they're doing a lot of rushing. So for next year, we'll be talking about that. We as in me and my partner D Mike. Check out our podcast, Science and Fantasy, by the way, on Fake Pigskin. And so that's how I like to certainly tie break running backs and even depth of running backs. I think if you've got teams that are rushing more likely the teams that have running backs, twos and threes and fours underneath the main player or players would be worth a nice investment, whereas the other teams, the faster teams, maybe not so much. For instance, Detroit's one of the slowest rushing attempts. That if you wonder, well, why isn't Jamal Williams getting more of a play? That's because the team is rolling fast for whatever reason, and they're just not rushing. So, and he's the second on the totem pole there. Swift is number one, so Jamal Williams is just not getting his play. So consider that for the rest of the season here, these tendencies. Okay, you're thinking, well, is passing or associated with slow or fast? The answer is no, actually. There may be some tendency actually to drop, which, kind of an inverse. But when I look at the data, it looks like kind of near average or below, right in this here is kind of the sweet spot. And I don't know if that's predictable, but there's where the numbers are. As far as scoring, hard to make a case for scoring. I will say above average. 5 of the 8 are faster. So we got 5 of the 8 top scoring teams are some of the fastest. So that's kind of interesting then. Snaps per second, rushing, passing, and scoring. What's the relationship? And it looks to me like the rushing is with the SPS, but scoring is not so much. It's almost an inverse here. And if you're fairly fast, at least half of the league, the top half of the league, you're probably potentially are in the higher scoring category, and not sure about where passing leads. So there's some relationship here. And if you hadn't figured this out, I like to understand the whole landscape, okay, and top down. And my diatribe has been, if you focus too much on individual players outside their position and team, I think you lose insight, okay? I understand we all, at some point, get down to the player metrics. No problem with that. It's just I think the journey to get there needs to be a little longer and a little more thoughtful than I see many doing. And, hey, whatever works for you. But this is my process. This is what I look at first, is team layer. So I'm going top down. And so this figure here looks at the trend lines. So sometimes it's best to smooth out the data using trend lines. And Excel is great software to do trend lines. I do polynomial trend lines here. Okay, we'll talk about why I don't use linear regression. I think that's a little bit too blunt force. I think polynomial regression and polynomial trend lines are a lot more subtle, and I think you get a little bit more insight. So the first thing is I plotted the average of player SPS. That's the blue line with the red data points here. And first thing you could see, look at how most of the league is kind of linear, kind of going down, of course, because I'm sorting that way. But these teams are really extreme on the speed. It's like they're really off from the rest. It's like if this is a tier system, these five would be one tier, and then you'd have probably trouble breaking, somewhere in here would be the bottom tier, and somewhere in here would be the next tier. You would have a little more trouble. This is pretty obvious. So, when I see this, I'm curious about, does that kind of break happen every year? So I probably need to do deeper years here. The red here is the average pass attempts, and you see the trend is dropping, not so dramatically, but a little bit of dropping. Not sure if that's overly significant, but the slower you're going, okay, and you're probably okay, fast, and even below average, but at some point the passing activity starts dropping and teams are slow. So there is kind of towards the bottom a trend to pass less. So in PPR, that is something to consider, especially in daily fantasy for, say, week 10. I would consider, just how many wide receivers you want to play in here versus some of these. Okay? So I think that's that trend. The rushing, on the other hand, is definitely going up. Check this out. About halfway through the system, bam. So as passing is dropping, rushing is increasing with a slowing SPS, snaps per second. Scoring, looks like if you're too fast, you're not scoring, but then you hit this sweet spot here, a fairly jaunty, fairly fast, and then it drops, and then maybe at the extremes, slow teams, you kind of pick up your scoring a little bit. But it looks to me the scoring is tending to be in this range here. So these are the teams that are scoring well, still fairly fast, and they're probably passing a lot more than probably rushing. So I think this is what the metrics are trying to tell us. They're pointing us to trends in the league. Okay, so again, we're not talking about individual players or even positions at this point. So, you have to get a little deeper into the metrics here, but that's kind of the overall journey that the league is on here. So I think this is very, very intriguing. Okay, and as far as I know, I haven't seen any metrics like this. Like I said, I'm probably not surprised, coming from a science background. Basically all my life I've been a scientist. Some people say you're a scientist until you earn your PhD, and then everybody else knows what you've already been. So I think as a kid, I was the weird kid down the street. I was just different, thinking, doing things just the way I am. And I got a piece of paper says I am officially weird, right? Piled higher and deeper, I believe, is the joke. So that was intriguing to me. I also wanted to follow the last few weeks and look to see if teams have been speeding up or slowing down. So I created the difference metric here. So I'll show you the same figure with the snaps per second. So we've seen this third time through, except this time I figured out the change in velocity over the last 2 or 3 weeks compared to the preceding 3 weeks. Right? I think it's the last 3 weeks versus the preceding 3 weeks. So, and I've starred, Dallas has sped up and the Jets have sped up. Probably more passing, less rushing. So Ezekiel is probably not going to get his full play this year. Dallas is trying to speed up, and maybe with that coming back and getting right, that we will see more of a passing situation. People were complaining about, Dallas and doing too much running, not enough passing. So that I'm curious if that change in trend is going to continue. The opposite, teams like Detroit and Philly, even though they're the top in recent times, they have been slowing down. So has the Chargers, implying maybe a little more rushing than usual. You can see the yellow is the low and the purple is the high. So just make note of some of these changing trends. Maybe moving from rushing to passing. Look at New Orleans, quarterback change, and we're speeding up a little bit. So I'm curious here in the next 4 or 5 weeks, will we see New Orleans moving definitely up here? So it's curious to see how all that goes in passing. So I might predict that Miami, Raiders, and New Orleans are going to be passing more than we've seen. Okay. And so you can kind of make little notes here. So maybe that can be interesting tiebreaker in daily fantasy sports. Here is again the SPS. And now I did a scattergram and just plotted the points for each team going from high to low SPS. And you see these two orange dashed lines. That represents the one standard deviation above or below the average for the difference. So what I look for is the extremes. So teams that are on higher or lower than the majority of the teams I consider extreme. So notice Dallas is up there. Notice I circled or starred the Jets. Other teams are here. I believe that is Cincinnati. I believe the Chicago, Miami, Raiders, and New Orleans are all extreme and speeding up. Teams that are slowing down recently, Detroit, Philly, and the Chargers are the very extreme slowing down, like they put the anchor on here. The Giants, New England, Tennessee, and Cleveland. Those teams may be changing their strategies and styles. So just take a look at that, see what you think. Here is now positional levels. Okay, so I like to focus in on the last few weeks. Here I did the last 5 weeks just to kind of get, what occurred in the first few weeks. It's time to move on. I think some people hang around with their metrics too long. I think, yes, the more data points, the better, but in fantasy, in reality, we never have enough data points compared to real statistics, the laws of large numbers. We just don't have that. So with that said, hey, I try to, part of fantasy is you try to figure out trends and catch before everybody else is awake. So part of that to me is shifting my filters to look at, in this case, weeks 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I recalculated the average SPS at the positional level and then figured out based on the team what is the usage if we use snaps per second as the bottom line here. We get a usage percentage. How does that break out between the wide receiver, tight end, and running backs? Here's going to add up to 100. And then the final thing that I know people do not do, and that's why I like my figures to be pretty much slap in your face, pretty obvious, is I went and took all the running backs in the league, tight end, and running wide receivers, and I sorted them from high to low and superimposed a scaled score of 100, the best, to 0, the worst. And what you see here is what I've deemed usage score. Anything high is one of the extremes in the league for usage. Anything low is extreme in the bottom of the league. So how you would figure this out, first things I look at, kind of what's been going on lately. The running backs, as far as snaps per second, hasn't been too strong. Tight end, I think, really woke up in week 9, but week 8 was pretty weak. And then the running backs, the wide receivers, even a little bit weak. But remember who was on center, Colt McCoy. So this is Murray's world, all about the running back. Colt McCoy's world, there was a lot more usage of the tight end and whatnot. So I'm not sure what we get this week. But overall, 29%, 26%, and 45%. And you're saying, well, what does that really mean? That's high. This is the low. Compared to the league, though, usage scores answers the question. Arizona is a 93 out of 100, very high compared to the league. So that's very intriguing. So that's why the depth of running wide receivers can be supported, because we do have a large usage. Running back, 29%, even though it's not really great, is really in the top 70%, 69. But the tight end is a 2. So compared to the rest of the league, Arizona doesn't use its tight end at all. So Ertz coming in to a situation where they just had been using the tight end. So maybe Ertz will change that. We'll monitor. So Atlanta, if you take a look, and Baltimore, you take a look, and Buffalo. So I like to use the usage scores. So now I actually graph the usage scores of each team. So to me, it's a visual look, and I see what Arizona's been doing. Atlanta's been really relying on its running backs and tight ends much more than the wide receivers. Probably makes sense, right? So that means that there's going to be a lot more. Of course, remember Cordell Patterson and Pitts. That's their top dogs, and here they are. Calvin Ridley's out. So this is kind of a weakness of Atlanta. So be cautious when you're using people like Gage or Sharp or Zacchaeus. They can be a lot more volatile because that's not going with the team's flow. Baltimore is all about the rushing, okay? So their weakness is it's all about the rush. If you can stop the rushing of Baltimore, you really knock them off their game. Buffalo, same thing. They really invest in the running backs and the tight end, believe it or not. Buffalo is underusing its wide receivers. Underusing them. So that means Diggs, etc., are getting less play than if you drafted than you hoped. And you're wondering why. This is why. You can see what's going on. So if I was using wide receivers in daily fantasy, I would be looking more here than actually here, with the team's trends. Same kind of thing. You can look at the actual metrics here, see what's going on. But to me, this is more revealing. Okay, so looking at this, Carolina, probably not surprising that they're all in on the wide receivers and running backs, and they've not been using their tight end. Chicago has been using its tight end more than probably we would think. Cole Kmet has just not put the scoring together. But Chicago has been passing more. Interesting. And Cincinnati, they've really been probably more than we think relying on their tight ends and running back Mixon and not so much on the wide receivers. So why has there been issues with the wide receiver? Well, here it is. The team is not putting it, the wide receivers on the same level as their other positions. Cleveland's all about the tight ends, but they've been putting more to the wide receivers and less to the running back. And I think that, if Chubb doesn't come back, Dearness Johnson will be in this kind of team's scenario, and he's going to get some, but the tight ends and the wide receivers are going to be more of an emphasis there. Dallas, Denver, Detroit, and Green Bay. You can look at the numbers if you would like. I like the visual. Dallas has been doing running backs and wide receivers, even though Schultz has had some breakout games. They still haven't been using the tight end like they could, right? And Denver's all about their running backs, not about their wide receivers. And surprisingly, Fant has not been getting his fair share. You would think it would be a lot higher, but it's not. So I think Fant is going to be held back by this team's usage here. Detroit, same thing. But Hawkinson's getting more of a play than Fant here, and it's all about the Swift usage here. And here again, the wide receivers. Denver and Detroit look a lot alike. It's just Detroit's investing more in the tight end than in Denver. Green Bay, it's all about Aaron Jones and the wide receivers. Everybody's squawking about the tight ends. I understand, but just be aware that this is not a strong scenario if you look across multiple weeks here. Not at all. Houston, Indiana, Jacksonville, and Kansas City. Houston's all about the passing, the wide receivers. And Indianapolis is equal wide receivers and running backs with some tight end. It's actually a little bit closer to being balanced than we might have been realizing. And Jacksonville has been doing that same kind of scenario. So I think people have been saying Jacksonville, is maybe winning games, but the way they're distributing their usage is not bad, actually, the way it looks to me. Kansas City, rightly so, has been using the tight end, but surprisingly, running backs and then wide receivers. And I would have thought with Tyreek Hill that he would have been doing more. So that may be, besides turning over the ball, the team usages are skewed, in my opinion. This should go down and that should have gone up, and that's not what we see here. Chargers, Rams, Raiders, Miami. The Chargers with Eckler, been running. Tight end, not bad, and the wide receiver. So towards a balanced play here. And I have mentioned in the weeks that I do like the U pattern. That's kind of neat. Or the diagonal pattern are the ones that I think are more positive than the other patterns. So you might go back and look at that. The Rams have been putting it all on the running back, tight end, and believe it or not, even though Cup has been doing well, they could do a lot better by their wide receivers. They're being underused compared to the league here, and that's probably would shock a lot of people. It's just the way it is. Raiders, it's all about the Waller and the wide receivers, actually. So the Raiders wide receivers, in some ways, are getting a lot more attention than the Rams wide receivers. And Miami has not been giving their wide receivers much play. Gesicki's been getting a lot of the activity here, and the running backs have been getting the activity. So that's kind of it's not a positive pattern skewing so much towards the one position. Minnesota, New England, New Orleans, and the Giants. Minnesota, Dalvin Cook and the wide receivers, that looks pretty good. The tight end, so again, a U pattern, that looks good. New England has been all about the tight end. Forget the running backs and the wide receivers, running backs better. But tight ends have really gotten a lot of that team's attention. Best in the league, actually. So New Orleans, even though the tight ends haven't been doing what they need to do, they're getting the most attention. So to me, that's not good. That's a bad sign. And the wide receivers are poorly used here in New Orleans. Maybe the new Hill and Simeon will change that. But right now, Kamara should be involved. Love that. But I think a lot of this activity should have been going to the wide receivers. The Giants, one of the worst in the league towards their wide receivers. If you wonder why Tony's not been doing well, or volatile, that's why. Look at this. It just explains it. Whereas Ingram, people have been surprised at Ingram. I hadn't been surprised. Look at this usage here. Come on, folks. That's higher than Fant and Hawkinson. Okay, and Ingram has been scoring here. Running back, with Barkley and now Booker have been doing pretty good, but the team is out of balance, out of whack here, not using their wide receivers. Not good. Jets, probably too much running back, not enough wide receivers. Tight end maybe a little too high, but still not bad. I just think this should go up and that should go down to get a little bit more an equalness. I think they're too reliant on the running backs, Jets. Philadelphia, tight ends, running backs, not as much on the wide receivers. Bottom third of the league here. Not good. Philadelphia. Philadelphia is in a bind with this kind of pattern. Pittsburgh, you would think Harris would have more play, but he's actually not. They have been using the tight end and the wide receivers a hell of a lot. Tight end's one of the best in the league. That's nice. So is Seattle. Okay, look at the running backs in Seattle. Do they need a good running back or what? Look at that. That's almost worse than the league. And yet the wide receiver is almost best in the league. So it's really a skewed team as well. So I look for patterns. I look for balance. I look for the skews. I look for teams that are using tight ends more than everybody else. Good for tight ends, but not so good for the team as a whole. Okay. And the last four, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, Tennessee, and Washington. San Francisco, let's not do anything but run, and running backs. So Kittle is I know he's been hurt, but he hasn't been given an opportunity. It's in the bottom third of the league. Kittle's too good a tight end to be treated that way. And the wide receivers are, what, 20-something percent. That's weak. San Francisco needs to completely change its game script here. And I think once a team gets into a pattern, I wonder how hard it is to break it up unless you get a new coach change. Tampa Bay has been balanced between running back and tight end and using their wide receivers a lot. So obviously they've been doing pretty good with that. I think they're underutilizing Fournette. And but they're not going to change if they're winning. Tennessee running back with Henry, and that's going to be falling now. And then they've been relying a lot on the tight end. So in daily fantasy, the 70 top third, Tennessee's been using the tight end, and Washington. That's why Ricky Seals-Jones is such a great handcuff for Logan Thomas. Look at that. When he comes back, he's going to be worth everything. So if somebody's dropped Logan Thomas, pick him up. But other than McLaurin, you don't want much depth in the running backs. The wide receivers. So you can look at these patterns and consider the depth of how much you want to invest. Like, do you want to go other than the top one? Right? That's a lot of question. So you can check that out. I really like this, and I do it every week. And you're saying, well, why do you do this? Well, certainly not for the fame or the money, because there's neither in fantasy. This is stuff I do anyway. So by me talking about it, looking at it, every week looking at it, it kind of gets embedded in my head, and it keeps this to the fingertips, what we call fingertip knowledge, that you just have it out there. And to me, that's helps me win my league. So I'm doing something I'm going to do anyway. And anybody that wants to write or do fantasy, that's the way you do it. Do whatever you're doing for your own leagues and try to turn that into content. That's what I would do. Okay, having written 700-800 articles in the last years. Okay. What's next? Usage scores. So same scores, except now instead of team level, I do positional level, and I graphed, bar graphed, and I did high to about the 25th percentile. So I really wanted the weak teams to really stand out on the graph here. And Seattle and Pittsburgh, look at that. You would think Harris would be a lot higher. Cleveland with Chubb. Houston, Tampa Bay, the Rams in the last few weeks have been piss poor. Green Bay, San Francisco, Denver, Baltimore, Buffalo, Carolina, Jets, Dallas, Detroit, the Giants have all been the opposite, using their running backs. And you can see the scoring patterns here and the usage scores. So in daily fantasy, I think these would be less uncertain than these teams down here. Okay, I didn't mean always play these and don't play those. I just mean that's the trend. That's the tendency. As you know, you have to break trends and tendencies sometimes, right? Especially in daily fantasy sports. You've got to zig while everybody's zagging. Tight ends, here are the tops, right here in green. Here are the bottoms. And notice the worst are really bad. Okay, Dallas, Jets, Minnesota, Jacksonville, Carolina, Green Bay, and Arizona. So sad. But these are really, so this is really skewed to how tight ends are being used in the league right now in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think that's very intriguing. And you see almost no usage there. Same thing, even worse with wide receivers. It's like we got some teams that are just in a bind with wide receivers. I don't know if this has been such a dramatic shift in this kind of usage here. It's been a while. I need to look across the years to see, does that explain some of the interesting games that we've seen. Is just when teams are down here, and that usually should be a lot of the bread and butter of a team is their wide receivers, and there's teams with serious issues this year. A lot. Look at those in red. Not so good. So I go through each team. I give you the team, position, player, their average snaps per second from weeks 4 to 9, and you can look at their SPS. And then I sorted by high to low, so you can see who the top players are at each position. You can see the breaks, if you think about it as tiers, and consider what's done lately. You can look at the weekly and get a feel. So to me, this is reference material. It's not necessarily things that I will or will not act on. I think it's just kind of knowledge that you need to see and understand, right? Yes. So my article, Fake Pigskin, I actually going to have all these available for, static viewing. Okay. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time quoting you numbers when you can read the static things. Okay. So if the next 32 slides, including this one, I'm just going to hit some things that occur to me. It doesn't mean they're everything. Doesn't mean this is all I pay attention to. This is just as I'm going through the data, what's hitting me. Okay. And that's it. So you'll have to go in and study this. I made this data, right? So I kind of make note of things as I roll through. So Connor looks good, okay, because we got injuries here. Ertz is really doing well the last couple weeks, so I'm encouraged by that, even though they don't use the tight end. Traditionally, it's been Green, Hopkins, and Kurt. Those three. Kurt was the number one. If Hopkins is out and Green is in, then it'll be a Kurt Green kind of thing. I don't know if Montez Moore's out too. But anyway, those will be the two I would focus on. Atlanta. No, we don't like Mike Davis, but he gets, his snaps. So does Patterson. They've been doing about the same the last couple of weeks. Pitts has been producing a higher SPS, and when Ridley's on the field, he's very dominant. But now we're back to Gage. So if you look at snaps, it would be Pitts and then Gage. Okay, and then Zacchaeus really. But Sharp has been getting that, so it looks like these three here. It's just sometimes scoring doesn't go. All we can do is hope this spells future opportunity, right? This is not a touchdown prediction metric here. I'm not sure there is one. If there is, whoever has it, and if it's good, they're not telling us and they're making money, right? Right. Baltimore. Murray was out, so I guess it was Freeman last night. Andrews, clearly a nice tight end. I think did he catch a touchdown? I don't remember. Or it's a Bateman. Anyway, Andrew's doing well. Brown and Bateman, and notice that Duvernay and Watkins as well, when they've been there, have been. So there's kind of a mix here with these. So you have Brown number one, and then kind of a mix of who the number two is. Bateman's the number two right now, based on the last 3 weeks. Moss is out, so it'll be a Singletary show like week 9. Knox, whenever he gets back, folks, that is a hellacious number right there for a tight end. So I'm hoping Knox comes back. Sanders has been outdoing Diggs, folks, and Beasley's been in the mix. So I think that's kind of the pecking order, at least by snaps per second. McCaffrey hadn't been doing as good as you think here. He could do better. Thomas has been the tight end, but so is Trimble. So it's Moore and Anderson, and that hasn't really changed. It's just not getting them involved. Carolina's not really, it's snapping them, putting them out there, but it's not doing what it needs to do to get them scoring. Maybe a Cam Newton will shake it up a little bit. So that's the only hope Anderson has, I think, at this point. If you have a deep bench and Anderson has been dropped, maybe a grab, just see what's going to happen, see if things shake up. Montgomery is back, doing well. Herbert went away, too bad. He was good while he lasted. Commit has been nicely snapped. It just hasn't been getting as many points as it needs to. Certainly a streamer just by volume. Robinson and Mooney, number 1 and 2, just are not putting it together like they need to for scoring purpose. Certainly Robinson. I don't know if that's going to change. You'll get what you get with Robinson. Mixon, all about the Mixon show. Uzama, doing well. Sample popped back up a little bit, but Uzama. Chase, Boyd, and Higgins. Regardless, people saying drop Boyd. Well, he's number 2 over Higgins. Okay? I don't know how to explain it, but I'm not dropping Boyd. May not use him a lot, but I'm not dropping him with this kind of snap share or snaps per second rate. Chubb did well. Okay, he did, pretty good, but that's about his level. He doesn't get higher than that. Njoku and Hooper pretty much trading the whole last 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Beckham's gone, so it's Peoples-Jones and Landry and maybe Swartz. Okay, I would have thought Higgins would have done well, but not. Dallas, it's the Ezekiel show, but Pollard woke up. So he has this tendency to wake up on occasions. I mean, you got to have him. I just don't know. I don't think he's playable unless you're in a bind or it's a favorable game script. Schultz, all about the Schultz. This is an insane number right there. 0.05 is amazing. Lamb, Cooper, Wilson. Wilson was the highest used. Probably would have surprised people. And Cooper was the least used. These guys have not been collecting the scores, though. And I guess with Gallup back, does Wilson? I don't know how it's going to go. If I had Wilson, I think I'd stash him. But I would definitely want to get Gallup as well. So I would probably go after Gallup just to see what happens. Gordon and Williams, everybody wants Javonte to overtake. They're not going to. Denver's using both of them and going to continue to use. It's going to be a committee. Just get used to it unless one gets injured. Fant is the show, okay? And his Albert took over for him, but Fant should be back. Sutton and Patrick and Judy. 1, 2, 3. So it's clearly the one is Sutton, and then Patrick and Judy flip-flopping around. So they're going to be using those three. Swift, Jamal's just been hurt, hasn't really been putting it together. It's all the Swift show. Hawkinson's nicely used and will continue to be nicely used. Raymond, St. Brown, Cephas is gone, so it was Benson is the number 3. So trouble is they're not really scoring, but I guess you have to go after Raymond. Jones, Dylan is used on occasion, but other weeks he's not. Tanyan's out, so it was Mercedes Lewis, and they're not using him like they could. Adams and Lazard, they're the top 2. Then we got Cobb and Scantling fighting for the 3rd shot. Houston, David Johnson, he's back. Didn't know he left, but that's probably the level he's going to be at here. Ingram's gone. So then I guess it's Burkhead, but a distant second. Brown's gone. Akins, and then last time it was Claire. So I don't know if he's a blocking tight end or what. Brandon Cooks, and then maybe Collins, and then Amendola. Trouble is they are not really scoring like they need to. Tyrod Taylor. Ugh. Jonathan Taylor, it's his show. Hines did get play, but look at the other weeks. So he didn't get play. Good luck picking those weeks. Cox and Doyle, they're really 1-2. Scoring wise may be different, but usage wise. Pittman and Pascal, not sure where Hilton's going to fall. Robinson, we need Robinson back. Hyde took over, but really didn't put it together. Dan Arnold has had some good weeks, folks. Marvin Jones, number 1. Chenault, number 2. Agnew, number 3. Right here. They've been consistently that way. Williams until Zelaire gets back. Okay, week 4, look at Zelaire versus Williams. He's actually got a lot more snaps per second than Zachaire when before he was injured. I'm not sure I don't know if they put Williams on the back burner as much as not. I don't know. We'll see. Kelsey, nice. He just needs to score more. Nicole Hardman and Hill seem to be the 1-2. And Pringle and DeMarcus Robinson seem like they flip-flop on who's dominant at the 3rd slot. Eckler, not bad. I guess Kelly is the number 2. I don't know. Cook, Parham, almost the same, and Anderson. Looks like Cook is kind of getting lost in this shuffle here. I don't know what that means. I'm a Cook owner and not pleased to see this scrum happening here between 3 of them. It's Allen and Williams, and that's it. I guess Guyton still is a viable injury handcuff. Henderson and Michelle got a lot of play last time, so I don't know what that means. If you're thinking, oh, okay, Michelle's going to be viable. He wasn't viable 4 weeks. Just be cautious. Higbee, it's the Higbee show. Woods caught Van Jefferson, everybody thinks Van Jefferson. I don't know. I mean, if you've got Woods and Cup and Jefferson, I think you hold until you see what it is. But I guess the conventional wisdom says Van Jefferson is knocked down and OBJ is in the scrum with these. So these guys both lose, and OBJ takes a lot of the Jefferson role as well. I don't know. We're going to see a couple games. I wouldn't drop anybody or trade anybody until I see. Jacobs and Drake were almost 1-2, and in week 7 they were flip-flopped. So I would be acquiring Drake and stashing and potentially using him because the last couple weeks he has had some play. All about the Waller. Holler for Waller. Zay Jones really got a play. Where did this come from? And Edwards. Ruggs is gone. So Renfro did not move up to the Ruggs spot. Jones looks like he maybe did. Jones may be a deep gamble play on occasion. Look for a favorable matchup to play him. Gaskins should be out there. Don't think he did too much last night. Grosecki, I think he didn't catch a single target. Was targeted, but and then you got some of these other ones flipping around. Miami's been using a lot of the tight ends. Parker's in and out, so it was Waddle, and I'm not sure he stepped up, and then Hollins. And I think Albert Williams caught a touchdown. He's the number 3, so good luck trying to pick that week. Cook. Got to have Cook. Conklin getting a lot of play. He's worth a stream. Jefferson and Thielen 1-2. And Osborne is an injury handcuff. Worth a stash if you've got either one of these two on a bench. Harris. I think he got hurt, and Bolden stepped up. Stevenson got hurt. Jacob Johnson came in there, so this week 9 is all wacky. Hunter Henry still outdoing Smith, but Smith is not going away. Myers and Aguilar and Bourne, 1, 2, 3, just like that. But they're not producing points. Kamara, and now with Ingram. But Ingram hasn't been doing as well. If Kamara's out, it looks like the Ingram show. Troutman's been a lot of points, but hasn't done too well. Callaway and Smith 1, 2, and I'm not sure. Not sure we can trust anybody else. Booker, and whenever Barkley's back, Booker's days. This is what Booker will look like when Barkley's full speed. Not good. Ingram is viable. If he's been dropped, take him. Shepard, when he is not injured, he can dominate this field. Slayton can. But last week it was kind of Tony, Galladay, Slayton. Tony's been, look at just the ins and outs here. If there's no consistency to this, and that means other than Slayton has had 3 solid weeks, I know Ross has been and Johnson, but they haven't done anything with their consistency. I guess you just hope Shepard comes back. Carter and Johnson got a lot of play last week. So if you got Johnson, you got to pick the week that he's going to get a run for the money. That was last week. Weeks before, he hasn't been as dominant. Griffin, he's the tight end to use. Crowder, Davis, so Davis was out, so Crowder was number one. And then Moore and Mims were tied for two, and then Cole. But everybody's rushing to get Moore, but look what Moore did the week before and the week before. Moore is inconsistent. I think he's showing flashes and certainly maybe worth a stab, but don't expect him to be at that number. And when Davis comes back, this can be the fate of Moore. He could be the fourth pick. So Moore has a lot of volatility, folks. So if you picked him up, keep him for a while, but don't be surprised when Davis comes back that it's Davis and Crowder, 1 and 2. Sanders, they need him back. They are just not producing that at all. Look at the deal here. Scott and Howard. Howard was signed, so I'm assuming Howard's going to move up. Not sure Scott is not going to stay here. So I think Howard has the most to gain, but Sanders has got to come back at some point. Goddard, he's the dog. Ertz is gone. Devonta Smith and Watkins has been the number one the last 2 weeks, and Smith has been number two. The preceding 4 weeks has been the other way around. Rager was something, and then I wouldn't carry Rager at this point. Unless you have an explanation, I wouldn't carry him. I'd just worry about these two. Harris, all about the Harris. Frymouth, all I will say was this guy, Gentry, starting to take a little bit of activity here. So, yeah, playing, but I like to see where everybody was low. Johnson, Claypool, I think Claypool might be injured, so it should be Washington. Excuse me. He may be worth a pickup. I did in a few leagues. Collins, Homer, these are just weak numbers to begin with. And even when Carson was back, he wasn't outpointing Collins a lot. There is just not a lot of momentum with the running backs here. Wilson's coming back, we'll see. Everett picked up last week with Geno Smith, but with Wilson, I don't know. But that muddies the water for both. Lockett, Metcalf, Swain, 1, 2, 3, just like that. Mitchell, wanting to see if Wilson comes back. Hasty, I've been getting rid of him. With Wilson coming back, I just don't see where, I know he catches some passes, but I don't know. Kittle jumped right back in the mix. Samuel and Ayuk, 1, 2. Sanu actually stepped up, had a best game in 5. But I think I will stick with these two right now. Sanu would be an injury handcuff play. All about the Fournette. Brait and Howard. Brait's been getting a lot more play last couple weeks than Howard. Hard to tell. Gronkowski's not playing. Godwin and Evans. If Godwin's out, then it's Tyler Johnson, maybe Darden. Brown's out, so it should be interesting if you have Evans. Henry's gone, so McNichols got the run with Peterson second. Those are the focus here. Dante Foreman's in the mix as well. But I guess it's McNichols because he has had some play on occasion. Don't know how long he can keep it up, though. Swain, Pruitt, and Frisker, look at them. They're all getting into a scrum here, but Swain is the top dog. And tight end is being used by Tennessee, so this might be a surprise streamer right here. Brown, Julio, if they're back, they'll be one too. If Julio is out, it's a you guess 'em. So I wouldn't play anybody but Brown and Julio if he's there. Washington, McKissick, and Gibson. McKissick's been out doing Gibson. Gibson's been hurt. You can tell when he got hurt right here. So I guess it's J.D. McKissick probably is going to get a lot of the show. So if he's dropped, grab him. If not, I think I'm sticking him in there this week. Not sure. If you're in a bind like I am, then yeah. Ricky Seals-Jones, all about it till Logo Thomas comes back. McLaurin, and then Carter and Humphreys are the next 1 and 2, 2 and 1, but they hadn't been putting it together. They got a lot of players here. We keep hoping for Curtis Samuel, but so far he's not been back on the field yet. So that was my player run through. Real quick, I looked at each position and looked at the SPS and gave you the top 25%. This is just for your knowledge. Kamara's number 1, Swift number 2. I wonder if people would have predicted Swift being number 2. I wonder. Okay, so take a look at that. Tight end, Ricky Seals-Jones, higher than Kelsey, folks, as far as snaps per second. Schultz is number 4. Higbee number 5. That kind of Komet, Fant, Hawkinson. So just take a look at that. I think it's kind of neat. Here are the top running backs. I included the top 25. It's a little harder to read, but you can see Devonta Smith is getting the opportunities. He's number 4. Even Ridley is still there. Look at this, Allen and Wood, the top 2 right there as far as SPS here. Look at Robbie Anderson getting a lot of attention, just not putting it together. CeeDee Lamb. So see, we're not the scoring side. This is only potentials and opportunities. But sometimes the team, the way they're distributing the usage, the quarterback, the matchups, it's just not going to turn into points, and that's a sad thing. Last series of figures, I just was curious if we went and took the top 25 at every position and put them back to their teams, what teams would have a lot of excellent players, what teams would have few. So Arizona has 1, Green. That's it. Atlanta has 4. Okay. Baltimore has 2. Buffalo has 4. Carolina has 4. Chicago has 5. So there's, just for my knowledge, it wasn't like this, correlates to anything. I just wanted to see, where the big time SPS is in the teams and who's the top dogs here. And this is static for you to look and see what's what, who's who. See if you can put that together with anything. Not sure what this says yet, but I just thought about it and just made the figure. Probably just for my knowledge, if nothing else. And here's this, and here's the last group here. Okay, so that's my 10-cent tour of Snaps Report. We went an hour, 9 minutes. I appreciate the 1 or 2 who are listening. Good for you. I think I gave you a lot to think about. Clarity. I know enough of stats to say that when you think about metrics, it's more range of outcomes than actual decisions. A lot of people like a quick decision. Who should I play? The question is, what's the range of outcomes for each player? So in other words, I'm asking you to go a little deeper. And so that's why I don't just, give you a laundry list of picks. Play these, don't play these, sleepers. I don't even know what that means anymore. So I deliberately do things differently. I try to have the metrics top to the bottom. I try to give you considerations of opportunities and then range of outcomes. Those to me is what I use, because when I'm making decisions, it's either really clear cut to me and it's probably not even close to a tie, or if it is a tie, then you got to have depth of thinking and just picking off a list. Well, he's 19th and this one's 20th. I'll take player 19. That's not how I do things. So that's not part of my process. Okay, I'm doing the process. You make decisions after you do the process, but the process is key. It's not the decisions. Okay. Okay, come back, have fun, good luck. You can do this. Let's crush this week. See ya. Dr. Bush signing off.